Welcome back. The September 25th Select Budget Committee will come back to order. It is 12:49 p.m. I'm Dan Strauss, Chair of the committee. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Kettle.
Here.
Councilmember Moore.
Present.
Council President Nelson.
Present.
Councilmember Saka.
Here.
Councilmember Morales.
Here.
And Chair Strauss.
Present.
6 present.
We will announce the council members as they return from recess. And just to reorient the public to where we are, we took a quick break after reviewing the Jumpstart Payroll Expense Tax portion of the City Budget Office Director's presentation. We will now return to this presentation. We have Councilmember Hollingsworth with us now. I am pulling up and so we left off on slide 24 of the attached presentation, where the next 10 slides will go through the notable reductions and changes to the budget. With that, Director Eder, we'll pass it right back over to you.
Thank you, Chair Strauss. As you mentioned, we covered in the morning the early initiatives that the mayor employed to set things up for the best possible outcome in 2025 during the course of this year. We also covered changes to the payroll expense tax. I mentioned that I was going to be diving into some of the reductions in programmatic investments and spending that are also included in the mayor's proposed budget to bring the general fund into balance. And as you just alluded to, the last portion of the presentation, after talking about reductions, is the adds, the priority investments that the mayor included that are new spending in the mayor's proposed budget. So diving into notable reductions and changes, I'm going to take these one category at a time. And of course, it's not going to be a comprehensive look. You're going to hear a lot more about all of the changes that are included, many changes that are included in the mayor's proposed budget, first from departments who will be starting to make presentations this Friday and continue into next week. You'll hear from central staff, and you'll have your own opportunities to make your own judgments. So some of the ones that I wanted to highlight are in the category of reduced external grant programs. Some of these are long-standing programs that did not make sense to eliminate, but we felt like we had no choice but to take some level of reduction in order to address the general fund deficit. Here, I would highlight for you, there's others, but I would highlight for you in the Office of Labor Standards, reductions that we took to the Business Outreach and Education Fund, referred to sometimes as BOEF, and also a corresponding reduction to the Community Outreach and Education Fund, COEF. Both of those are grant sources that are made to different sides of the equation: employers on the one hand, employees and labor groups on the other. They took equivalent percent reductions, about 17% in each case. But because the business investments started from a lower total amount of spending, so a 17% reduction is a smaller reduction than the Community Outreach and Education Fund, which had a larger dollar amount starting place. We applied an equal percent, but the dollar amounts are different. The Neighborhood Matching Fund is another one that I'd call out. I know it's a beloved program, provides funding to neighborhood proposed projects in a variety of different categories and sizes. We kept the program largely intact, but the mayor's proposed budget includes a 10% reduction, and that program is in the Department of Neighborhoods. The second category that I'll talk about is declining special purpose revenues. In past years, when these revenues, the sweetened beverage tax, I should have spelled that out on the slide, my apologies. SBT is the sweetened beverage tax, and the cable franchise fees. Both of those have been declining in recent years. In some of the past years, we have backfilled, I see Councilmember Kettle is doing his part. We have backfilled those revenues with general fund and tried to keep the programs that are supported with those particular revenue sources from having to take reductions. This year, given the state of where we started, we were not able to make those general fund investments to backfill the declining special purpose revenues. So in the case of the sweetened beverage tax, we were able to avoid all reductions in 2025. And we did that even though, as I described, there was a declining revenue source there. There is, however, some one-time unreserved fund balance that could be applied to keep those projects whole. That's money that had come in and wasn't spent in the adopted budget. So for 2025, there are no changes. In 2026, however, there are changes to the tune of about 8% or $1.3 million. In the proposed budget, recognizing the mayor's priority, and I think that'll be shared by many of you on the dais, council members, we kept food bank investments from taking any reduction, and also the Fresh Bucks program is also maintained at the same level of spending. That meant that other programs, such as the developmental bridge contract, parent-child plus contract, and the child care health care program, among others, will in the 2026 proposed budget be expected to have to take reductions. We are hopeful that there'll be good news on the revenue side, and that when we get around to the fall budget process for appropriations in the second year of the biennium, that we will have the wherewithal to keep those programs whole. But at this point, we just didn't have enough money available to us to make those in the current picture. Similarly, declining cable franchise fees. This is the fee that people like myself who have cable TV still pay. Fewer and fewer people have cable TV. I'm doing my part. But as a result, and also as a result of the problems on the general fund side, we have not been able to backfill the declining cable franchise fees with general fund, and therefore we are taking some pretty significant reductions with items that are funded with the cable franchise fees. Notably, the Seattle channel takes, in the proposed budget, a $1.6 million reduction. That would mean paring back Seattle channel programming to council and executive meetings, broadcasting meetings such as the one we're having right now, press conferences, and select forums by the mayor and council members. It would mean eliminating the other programming that happens on Seattle channel. And I know that is not welcome news. Was a hard choice for us as well, but we just don't have the money to continue that programming. I'm going to mention in the third category, other targeted reductions, a couple of items that I think will be of particular interest. That I'm sure there are others that we could talk about and that you will have a chance to hear from departments about in coming days. But I wanted to call out two. So the first is mounted patrol. This is a program in the Seattle Police Department, the city is currently paying for and has for some years been paying for the police officer staff costs. The foundation pays for all the other costs of operating the mounted patrol unit. That includes their facility costs, horse care and upkeep, and other sundry expenses. The city's share of those costs is about $250,000 related to mounted patrol, and we are no longer able to prioritize our share of the partnership. So our expectation, unless someone steps in with additional private money to pay for the officers' salaries, is that there will no longer be a mounted patrol. The police officers would not be laid off. I think there are 2 officers who work mounted patrol. They would be put into some other sworn officer role within the police force. Storefront Repair Fund is the second category that I wanted to highlight for you. This is a program that had been funded with federal pandemic relief dollars. They were one-time in nature, even though they lasted multiple years. As we discussed this morning, they have run out for this program, and even if they hadn't, we can't keep on spending them after the end of this year. We stopped taking applications for this program in July, and while we are open to and would love to have an innovative partnership and opportunity to continue this program in the mayor's proposed budget, there is no funding for 25 or 26. With that, I'll move on to the next slide.
I've got a couple, and then I see Council President has some questions. I'll just note that with the cable franchise fee reductions, this is a changing nature of our society. I recall the movie Cable Guy, which I believe was it was a creepy movie, very disturbing. It signified that at that time in society, the first call you made when you moved into a new apartment or house was to the cable company. At this point, it's more along the lines of calling the internet company or getting your Wi-Fi set up. It has changed. I'll also note that as a Seattle Channel geek, admirer, and loving of their awards and their award-winning programming, this is a hard one to stomach, so we'll be looking into that. And then on the storefront replacement program, it was my understanding that because of the rules surrounding gift of public funds from city dollars, this is why we had to use federal dollars to fund this program. And then to your point earlier in the presentation, we are required to use all of that federal funding by the end of this year. Is that all correct, or am I off a little bit?
No, you're absolutely right. It is the cleanest and easiest to defend the spending of federal dollars for this purpose. It is clearly not any kind of a problem for us to give away other people's money, the federal government's in this case. And so that's what we have been doing for the past several years. That money has run out, and even if it hadn't run out, the clock is ticking to the end of this year, and then we can no longer spend that money.
Thank you. Council President?
Thanks. Yes, it is true that the state constitution prohibits the gifting of public funds to private entities. There are ways of getting around that. One of them is using federal dollars, but the Clipper funds that are running out are not the only source of federal dollars. For example, there's CBDG money, and I was very much hoping that there would be an allocation from that revenue source to continue this program. Businesses receiving $2,000 or up to $4,000 if they apply twice. That's not a lot of money to replace a door or a storefront that's been ran through by a car that's been stolen. But the point is that small businesses need every bit of help that they can get. This is a beloved program, and it is, although a Band-Aid, an important gesture that also shows that the city does care about them, because this is happening because we're failing on public safety, and they're paying their business and occupation tax, they're not getting the services of public safety, and at the same time, many of them have hired private security. And so I will be looking for a way to, well, first of all, I would like to know later offline what is funded with CBDG dollars, and then see if there's a way of working out how we can continue this program.
I'll be happy to follow up and get you the full list of what we have funded with the community development block grant funding. I will say that we affirmatively considered and decided not to fund the program using CDBG dollars, principally because that particular flavor of federal funding comes with a long list of requirements for documenting and administrative kind of hurdles. And we thought, on balance, that for a $2,000 grant, it seemed unlikely to us that there would be anything like the uptake that there had been when we were using a different color of money, and that we feared that we would be dedicating the CDBG dollars to this program, but people would, upon learning what the requirements were for using the money, would decline to use the money. That's in the eye of the beholder. You can come to a different conclusion, of course.
Decline to use, I didn't understand. Decline to use the money for storefront repair?
Yes. If given $2,000 to do a window repair, folks have lined up and been very excited about using that money, getting that money for that purpose, but that didn't have the kind of administrative burden that CDBG does. And so if we now switch to the money that is available, CDBG, then there'll be new administrative burdens, and we think that moving forward, people won't use the money at anything like the same rate that they have used it in the past.
Right, because the goal of the program was to make it easy, so they just had
Exactly.
to provide the receipt for the repair.
Exactly.
And some other information. Well, the other option is funneling city monies, whatever the source may be, to nonprofits, and that is how we have ended up helping individuals and organizations in the community in the past. So, to be continued.
My sense is this is an area of particular interest to the council collectively, if not necessarily every individual, and have some initial thoughts. So my sense is that this issue and the potential reduction to this fund, the repair fund, is of interest and concern to many of you. And we've, on Central Staff side, begun to think about some strategies here. Because of legal sensitivities, I'm not going to go into all of them now, but just to note that thinking about how to address this given the constraints we have, and it may not be something we can fully resolve before you take final votes on the budget, but we could potentially set aside funding as we continue to evaluate what those options might be.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Back to you, Director Eater.
Okay, I'll continue on. Slide 25, please, Ben. Thank you. So I mentioned that there were some staffing reductions. I think the chair made some remarks as well. The mayor's proposed budget would eliminate 159 funded positions. 71 of those positions have incumbents. People have been working in those positions. The balance, a little more than half of those positions have been vacant. So there's no threat of layoffs for a vacant position. We took care in imposing the hiring freeze at the beginning of 2024 to avoid hiring staff just to lay them off in a few short months during as we dealt with the projected deficit. We prioritized in trying to figure out what programs and the affected staff that we needed to decrease funding to, and thereby decreasing some of the funded positions, to prioritize preserving public-facing functions. And I talked about some of those: core parks, libraries, community centers, community service centers, and the like. That left us focusing on internal services, departments that provide by and large, services to city employees. And that's where more than half, almost 2/3 of the positions that have incumbents that are providing services today to the city staff reside. I will spend a few minutes on the upcoming 3 slides talking more about each of those departments. It's the Information Technology Department. It's the Finance and Administrative Services Department and the Department of Human Services. Those are the 3 departments I was referring to that are less public service facing and more internal facing. But I also want to address that while not general fund positions, there were also 20 permit review positions that we were no longer able to continue funding in the mayor's proposed budget. Those are in the Department of Construction and Inspections. The positions are, their work is to review permits and expedite getting them completed in a full way. Their work is funded by permit fees exclusively. And there have been lower trends in the amount of permit fees. In part, that's due to economic conditions, high rates of interest for construction loans, and coupled with high construction costs. But also, this is in part due to legislative changes that have happened that have reduced the number of projects that are required to go through permitting. Some projects just are exempted. Here we're talking about affordable housing that doesn't have to go through design review, and some other projects that no longer have to do environmental reviews. I think I'll pause there, or I can go immediately into the next 3 slides.
I'll just, if I may, Director Eater, add to what you just said, to be very clear to the general public, every building that is built in Seattle has a permit review and inspection. I think what you were referring to, Director Eater, is that there are streamlined processes for certain types of projects like affordable housing, and still they have a permit and an inspection.
You said it much better than I did. Thank you for stepping in.
I do have other questions about this, but I'll save it for SDCI's presentation later this week or next week.
Great. I guess I probably should also start by saying that we too, like you said in your opening remarks, we recognize that these are real people who are providing real services. It is not a step that we took lightly. We understand that the effects are real and significant and quite devastating for the people who are affected by these reductions. So I just want to acknowledge that there are real people here who are affected.
Councilmember Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Dan, are these 71 filled positions full-time employees, or are there any TLTs, temporary term limited employees?
No, these are folks who I'm not sure I know the answer to your question, actually. I don't know. I can follow up with you.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Because there is a big difference between a full-time employee and a TLT is term limited temper. It's a temp.
Yes, but I understand the question. I don't have an answer to that question. I also don't have an answer to whether they are full-time or they're part-time. I just don't know, and that also makes a difference.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. We'll be digging into this more deeply, colleagues, and I appreciate the overview at this time. Back to you, Director Eater.
So at least for IT, I do know that they are FTEs, full-time equivalents, because the slide says so. So there's a total reduction. Again, these are the 3 internal-facing departments. The Information Technology Department had a total of 64 positions that were not funded in the mayor's proposed budget that had previously been funded in this year's budget. Of those 64 positions, 19 were filled, had incumbents in those positions. I'll go through each of these just briefly. You may have follow-up questions. I will likely have to get back to you on those follow-up questions I'm just forewarning you that I have a limited amount of information. There are 6 positions that were funded with cable-funded programming. Sorry, let me back up. There are 6 positions that are reduced in the Seattle channel. They were funded, as I mentioned, with cable franchise fees. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I'll just reiterate that council and executive coverage will remain, so that the channel will continue to provide streaming services and show council meetings and also some other forums. But other programming would be reduced and eliminated. So that would leave, there are 12 positions. This would eliminate 6 of the existing 12 positions. Device support is the next category. Between device support and the service desk support, there are a total of 17 positions that would be, the technical term is abrogated, reduced or eliminated. Device support is the first category, 11 positions. The effect of reducing 11 out of a current 44 positions is, and that means there'll be 33 positions left after the 11 positions are eliminated. This will have the effect of increasing the amount of time that city staff use in waiting for device help requests, and it may increase the amount of time that they are left using older computers before those devices are replaced. With respect to service desk decreases, there are currently 24 positions. 6 of them would be eliminated, so that would leave 18 positions. This could increase service desk wait times from about 3 minutes, which is the current average, to about 10 minutes on an expected basis. So again, this is city staff who are calling the IT department and asking for help. It would take a little bit longer, or significantly longer, for the service desk to be able to provide even a beginning of an answer. The next ones are project delivery positions. Here, there were a total of 48 positions. 12 positions would be eliminated. That would leave about 36 positions. It would likely lower the IT department's project portfolio moving forward, would be the anticipated effect. The next category that I have information about is the Acela positions. There are currently 30 staff who work on this permitting database that is public-facing, but also provides internal tracking for us to monitor the progress of and steps needed to complete permits. The 4 sunsetting positions would not be renewed after they are scheduled to end at the end of this year. And then finally, there are 23 positions that are funded with one-time federal grant dollars that they're term limited. I don't know if that's the technical term, but they are sunsetting positions. I think that's the right term, that are expected to stop being funded positions at the end of 2024. We were not able to prioritize adding general fund to continue those positions. Most of the staff have already moved to other positions inside the city or elsewhere, recognizing that their positions were only expected to last until the end of this year. They may have also moved to other positions outside the city. That's what I had on this slide regarding changes to staffing in the IT department. The next slide is the finance and...
Director Eater, just
Yes.
as we're going through, kind of similar to what Councilmember Rivera said about term limited employment, sunsetting employment, these are very helpful slides for our overview when we dive more deeply into it, I will want to understand which of these positions are currently filled and which ones have been vacant, which ones are term limited or set to expire. It makes a really big difference. I think for the same reason that we need to provide predictability for people receiving their permits to build buildings and understand how much it costs, we need to provide that same predictability to people who are planning their lives and living their lives, working for our city, serving our city. Thank you.
Understood. Slide 27 is Finance and Administrative Services coupled with the Office of City Finance. Here, each side has one of those two categories. In terms of FAS, there are 5 positions that would be eliminated in the proposed 2025 budget. 3 of those positions are filled. The positions are in purchasing and contracting and other divisions. Our expectation is that workload would be redistributed or absorbed, and some efficiencies have been identified through electronic processes. So in effect, these are the positions that we think when they go away, we will find other ways to get the work done. There are 2 new FTEs that would be added that would do network company regulation. And I don't have details about exactly what they do, but I can follow up and get you more information. On the Office of City Finance side, there are 21 and a half FTEs. There are 12 incumbents in those positions. The reductions are in the areas of remittance processing, treasury cashiers, risk management, accounting, and license and tax administration. We expect that the reduction in staffing is not going to be as painful as it might initially appear because of some changes in business processes, finding efficiencies that led to the department helping the budget office address the general fund needs, but also these positions are sometimes funded with a mix of funding, so it helps citywide funding picture. And finally, some of these positions were eliminated because peak workload has been completed. For instance, implementing some new taxes and fees. The last item here is that while we are, the mayor's proposed budget includes elimination of some positions, it also adds some positions in city finance. There are 5 new FTE positions who would be working on the Workday system, the new payroll system that the chair alluded to. These positions are already filled, but in 2025, we make those positions permanent, whereas they were hired on a temporary basis. There is an initial rollout of Workday that happened this year, but a second phase is expected to begin in 2025. It'll include linking Workday to historical data so that the city will maintain a complete historical HR database. So it's important work. I'll move on to the next slide. Human resources position changes. SDHR, the Seattle Department of Human Resources, will transition their non-core HR services to an advisory role, and departments will be responsible for managing these functions rather than SDHR. Rather than SDHR doing it centrally. These include eliminating the following positions: 4 FTEs who are in the Learning and Development Unit, 2 FTEs who are in Workforce Development, and 1.5 FTEs who are in the Workforce Equity Program. And what I want to stress here is that all of the work that I just mentioned will continue. It is important to the city. It'll be done by departments rather than being done centrally at SDHR, achieving some some cost savings, but also requiring us to eliminate some positions. Two other FTEs that are proposed to be eliminated involve work on the performance management system. It's called the E3. Departments that utilize the online E3 program will continue to use the E3 program, but it'll migrate to a non-online version. So we will continue using E3 for performance evaluations with the same competencies and rating scales unaffected by this change. And finally, there is one FTE reduction in the benefits administration team. SDHR will continue to promote, educate, and advise on the city's benefits and programs, and some benefit programs may be evaluated for efficiencies to absorb the work that is not being done by this FTE. Overall, there's a reduction of 10.5 FTEs. There are 8 incumbents who have filled those positions that would be eliminated. That's the end of the reductions and staffing adjustments portion. The next chapter to discuss are the priority adds. Would you like me to pause here, Chair?
Yes, I see we've got a couple hands, Councilmember Saka and then Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Director Eder, can you help me better understand this slide here and some of the specific factors you all considered or didn't consider? So as I understand, 10.5 FTEs from HR, there was a reduction in those positions from a centralized support perspective, meaning that the departments themselves retain the capability and will now be principally responsible for these same functions, carrying out these same functions, but at the centralized stat, like there's no more dedicated personnel to fill these. So did you, the executive also explore as part of this doing the opposite in terms of like maybe paring down HR personnel at the department level and maintaining or potentially beefing up the centralized HR staff with the idea that, hey, let's have an embedded model where you embed the HR folks, within, and maybe, one person is responsible for a number of departments. But did you consider the opposite of that as part of this whole analysis and where you all landed here?
That wasn't a major focus of the budget review, but I will say that in recent years, in the last 7 or 8 years, the city has embarked upon a consolidation of HR functions within SDHR that had been a much more dispersed model in the past. So there are definitely still HR functions that happen in departments, but some of those functions did become centralized in a past restructuring of how the city does its HR functions.
Thank you. So yeah, this approach here is definitely a validation or a sign off on the executive of a federated model. So I guess the broader, more strategic question that I've actually raised this in another session of some sort a few months ago, but like, is that the optimal model from a cost savings and effectiveness and efficiency standpoint, a federated model, or more of a centralized model? Like we have essentially a hybrid approach today, but like, is there a better balance to, again, in a limited resource environment, to allow us to do more with less and have equal bang for our buck?
Just as a comment, and excuse me, to echo some of what Director Eder said, I don't have an opinion one way or the other. What I can comment about is that there has been, over my umpteen years in the city, kind of waves of this in both directions. The tide has gone out and come in. Just for the general awareness, there is, I'm going to use the word tension, but it's maybe not an unhealthy one, between some of the larger departments in particular, so the two utilities, SDOT, SDCI, which are themselves each like 1,000-person organizations, and their sense that they have specific HR needs that are very much their own, if you will, and they have their own contracts, and then, and whether somebody in a central office can fully, so only to say that, like, I can see your smile, because that is an excuse or a rationale for decentralized, and I'm not saying that there's one or the other. In fact, some balance is ultimately what has always been settled on, but where exactly that balance is. So it's a really good question, and it's one that's interesting the city has answered in different ways over time.
Of
depending on
course.
pressures.
And where we've landed as a city might have changed with the latest understandings and best practices and HR planning and implementation. And so, which I understand. And yeah, of course, there's a number of executive departments with 1,000+ people, and they're, but I would argue no department is a special snowflake. If it doesn't make the most sense for the taxpayer, and we can achieve substantially the same thing. But I do think it is an area, like I said, worth further exploring. I think that, on the executive side, what is the optimal model today? Thank you.
Sorry, something else occurred to me. I would add too. We are currently in partnership with City Budget Office in engagement with a consultant who's taking a look, comparing our expenditure on these centralized services, IT, HR, and fleets and facilities, and using really relatively specific level budget data, comparing us to other cities. That work at a technical level just got started in the past month or so. It took us a while to get the contract going. So we won't have results before you're all facing votes, but it will be some work that we'll see results for back in early next year. And that's not to take away from what you're describing, but only to add some information about some work that's underway.
Thank you.
Council President.
How much is the savings from the 71 filled positions, please?
That is a question that I asked myself and don't yet have an answer to, but we are working to add up all of the different salary and benefits numbers. It's in the neighborhood of about $15 million. I don't have an more exact number quite yet.
Okay, do you have an exact number for the 159 altogether?
Sorry, that's what I was referring to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So 15 is 159. I'm thinking, I asked specifically about the 71. It's a subset of 15 or
I'm
whatever.
giving a ballpark estimate we will follow up with more specific information to give you a flavor of what the costs are.
Thank you.
Savings are, not the costs.
And before we move on, Director Noble just mentioned something that I'm going to come back to later at the end of this presentation. It isn't something that we've shared publicly until just now. So I might ask, and I'll take a step back for context. We did the deep review and examination, the definition of an audit, but not technically an audit. This year, that review and examination has never been done before in recent memory. In that process and working with CBO, we identified that internal services needed additional review. And this was not review that we necessarily had capacity to do internally, which is why we hired an outside consultant. So with that context, Director Noble, could you repeat your answer back to that you gave to Councilmember Saka, because this is important information.
Yeah, so with that intro, I'll even back up a little bit further. So as part of last year's budget process, there was a statement of legislative intent adopted with a particular focus on these internal service departments, so IT, FAS, and HR. Because I think my interpretation of the why I wasn't actually here when it was passed was that they consume a significant part of the city budget. That kind of basic support doesn't come for free, if you will. And I think in last year's budget they were increasing. As in my former role as budget director, this was always a challenge because those budgets, there's regular pressure on them, and it's sort of hard to sell those increases, if you will, and to add money to those departments while you're not adding it to direct services. So, but there also, I can speak from my experience in the budget office and certainly from the council side that that was not the one you wanted. That's the one you want.
Sorry, I'm running out of juice.
Yeah. Sorry, as we sort that out. That's all I got.
That's good, thanks.
So they are hard to penetrate from a central perspective, whether you're in the budget office or whether you are on central staff, for instance. So we had a joint interest, hence in the statement of legislative intent, called on CBO to work with central staff to start to tackle this issue and see what we can do. And we poked around and looked for some, and thought about some different ideas. And there is a firm, one that I've encountered previously in my role, budget director, that has as clients many cities across the country. They budgeting for results is kind of their rubric, if you will. And they, for a relatively modest sum in the context of public monies, offered a service to, again, essentially benchmark, is the way I think about it, our expenditures in these areas against comparable cities. To give us some idea of where we may be spending more or less. And again, they're doing this not just at a department level, but getting budget data down to kind of the individual services that are being offered and the staff that were there. So they now have our data, and they are working with it and running these comparisons, and we'll get some of these results back, I think, either late this year or early next. So, because this is going to be an engaged process, a longer-term process to dig in. I think I'm anticipating that information will lead us to then dive ourselves in a little bit further. Like kind of the way I've described this is we'll see where there's smoke, and then we can go just figure out whether there's really a fire there, if you will, and there's something that we can address. So that work is recently underway, and I'm again, having seen this from both sides, really looking forward to what we get back.
Thank you, Director Noble. I'll be touching on this in just a little bit. I just wanted to raise it up a little bit louder because it's. You spoke as if we've talked about it a lot, and so I just wanted to make sure that council members were hearing exactly what you were saying.
I appreciate that opportunity. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Morales.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to thank both of you for bringing that up. That was a slide that we worked on in my office last year because, if I recall, it looked like indirect services were going up 10, 15%, and there was no explanation for why that was happening and no real way to pull out by department what was happening. So I'm also looking forward to seeing the results of that. So, thank you.
We're happy to be partnering with the legislative department, council members, central staff on this effort.
Well said. Other colleagues, any questions at this time? Seeing none, back to you, Director Eater. That was the bad news.
Well, before we leave the bad news, I have some answers to questions that folks asked. My amazing team has given me in real time, some of the answers to questions that council members asked, so I'll just put them on the record. The positions that I noted that are being eliminated are all regular positions. None of them are temporary long-term positions. And Council President, I threw out a guesstimate of around 15 million. I was wrong. It is more like 25 million, applying some averages, and we're talking about both salary and fully loaded cost benefits, et cetera. So it gives you a better flavor than what I was able off the cuff to throw out there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Chair Strauss teed up that this was a happier news portion of my presentation where I get to talk about some of the mayor's top priorities that were funded in the budget. The first of four categories is investments in public safety. And here I'm highlighting only just some of the top lines from what got funded in the mayor's proposed budget. There is first and foremost ongoing funding for initiatives that were started in 2024 that would only make sense to continue rather than start and stop within a few months. But those did add costs to the budget, and that's part of why the $250 million wasn't the full picture. It was a point-in-time estimate that didn't reflect because it didn't yet know that we would have some of these new initiatives starting in 24 that wanted to continue in 25 and beyond. So in that category of ongoing funding for programs that were begun this year is the care expansion. In the mid-year supplemental, 23 positions were added. Those positions are being hired now and are expected to be fully staffed by the end of this year. That means that starting in January, we have the beginning of a full year of costs for those new staff members who allow us to expand the types of calls and the geographic breadth that the care team will cover. We also increased the number of firefighter recruit classes and paramedic staff training in '24. We are continuing that because the costs continue into 2025. Pedestrian lighting, the council's final version of the mid-year supplemental included $500,000 to do pedestrian level public safety oriented lighting, such as the overhead lights that you see on 3rd Avenue that were installed in the last couple of weeks. There's also been in recent months, I think it was last year, some similar type pedestrian lighting installed at the City Hall Park. Both of them have been very effective and I think well appreciated for the changes that they're making in those areas, particularly enhancing public safety. So we have continued that program. There's $1 million included in the mayor's proposed budget for that purpose. Emphasis patrols, and there's been a lot of public discussion about, we don't have as many police officers in positions that we would like to have. That means that the hardworking sworn officers need to do more work than regular time. They are working their full regular jobs and also doing overtime. That overtime costs money. In the mid-year supplemental, there was $12.8 million of overtime costs for all of the work that SP does, but in particular for the focused work that they're doing downtown and in other places where there's been an uptick in street disorder. And those have also been very effective, and we've decided that it makes sense to continue those emphasis patrols, which is really overtime for police, in the 2025 proposed budget. The second category I'll bring your
Director
attention
Eater,
to.
Just before we move on there, it seems that Councilmember Rivera has a question.
I do, Chair.
Please.
Dan, on the care expansion, so I've been hearing concerns about calling 911. The non-emergency line is not being answered. And when I started here in January, I had a conversation with Chief Bartum about the 911 call center and the ability to answer all the 911 calls. But now it seems like there's an issue with folks calling 911, getting redirected to non-emergency line, which cannot be answered. And so I say all this to say, is there some focus on the 911 call center? I keep hearing from those folks that there aren't enough people to staff the line. And then this is in turn giving me pause. And so as we're talking about this care expansion, will this expansion include anything related to the 911 call center and the needs that are there?
I am speaking exclusively about the care team expansion here. I will have to get back to you about whether the budget includes any additional funding for the 911 call center. I don't have that information at my immediate fingertips.
That would be great. Thank you, Dan. And then on the emphasis patrols, I understand it's overtime for current officers to handle some of these hot spots, I'm going to call them, including downtown. Are there other areas for this emphasis patrols being anticipated beyond downtown?
Well, it depends how you define downtown, but I know that in 2024, the Chinatown International District has been a focus of these emphasis patrols as well. There may be other neighborhoods that I am not thinking of at the moment. I just don't know.
Would be great to find out
Yeah.
if you could. Thank you so much, Dan.
Glad to
Thank
follow
you,
up with you.
Chair.
Councilmember Nelson?
You mentioned overtime, and it seems like Greg Doss, mid-year or third quarter starts to, when he presents to the Public Safety Committee, he starts to say that we are now approaching, we could very well get to the limit of the money allocated for overtime in SPD's budget, and I believe a lot of that is funded by salary savings. You don't have the officers, and so then you need to pay for overtime, et cetera. Has there ever been any thought of allocating a cushion for overtime so that we don't always run into that tension? Especially since you are doing some welcome emphasis patrols in key areas.
Yeah, we always do our best to predict what the overtime needs are going to be. The unpredictable factor is how many staff will actually be online at any given day, week, or month of the year. Those are all predictions. So we do our best to look forward to what the staffing is going to look like and what the overtime needs are going to be based on that staffing. And then we're right in some cases, not right in others. And there are corresponding effects on the overtime needs. Particularly when, as I said, officers are, and as you said, officers are doing the work of the people who aren't there. We have folks who are working, doing special events, doing special patrols, that we would love to have more police officers to do that on regular time.
Right, but since they're not, it's a question of number of bodies and number of dollars that we can throw at performing that function. And I am also thinking about the World Cup in 2026, where I can imagine there will be some overtime needs, even though we have civilianized some of the functions in SPD precisely for large events.
If the council receives good news and the city at large receives good news in the revenue forecast, there'll be extra money. That might be a place to prioritize spending some of that money. There are a lot of competing demands, of course.
In overtime, is that what you mean?
That if you were interested in providing additional funding above the $10 million that we are adding to the budget, if you wanted to add $11 million, that would take another $1 million from somewhere.
Okay, I didn't realize that there was an additional $10 million.
Yes. And as I mentioned, last year we added $12.8 million. This year we are hoping that our staffing will increase, and we will be looking at a lower number of dollars that are needed for these emphasis patrols. Remains to be seen.
Yeah, hope is not a plan.
We are trending in a very good direction in terms of attracting, I think, 3 times the number of officers who are, applicants
Right.
who are interested in becoming officers. So that is a very positive sign and gives us a reason to be hopeful.
Right. Thank you.
Councilmember Sacco?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Council President, for mentioning the World Cup and the impact potentially. Yeah, oh, I love that. I love that. Absolutely. It's a great point. I guess my hope is not a plan, but you know, that SPD in Seattle wouldn't be solely responsible for providing policing services during an international event like the World Cup. So. Yes, we have we bear some responsibility, but we need more uniformed federal, state, and even county presence to help augment you know, an already exciting but fairly hectic period. On the issue of emphasis patrols, thanks for calling out some scenarios. Scratches the surface, obviously. But it also allows me an opportunity to share, like, we need more emphasis patrols in Elki and Harbor Avenue during known problem area, like problem activity seasons, really. It's the busy seasons because it's a premier destination beach, and busy seasons are May through September. And, you know, we need increased emphasis patrols in Elki and Harbor Avenue during those times, and especially, you know, on weekends. And but in terms of also just wanted to note, it's a delicate balance. Emphasis patrols, which is essentially overtime, extra work for our officers, it does also impose a non-trivial risk of further burdening and overworking our officers and creating to burnout, I guess. So it's a delicate balance that our police chief and at the direction of our mayor, are going to be best empowered to figure out the appropriate split there. But my point is, we do need emphasis patrols now more than ever, and including in Elki and Harbor Avenue. What is the investment amount for emphasis patrols on this slide here? Ongoing funding for programs begun in 2024. So what is the investment amount for program for this year, and what was it last year for emphasis patrols?
It was $12.8 million last year. The amount of money included in the proposed budget this year is $10 million.
But that's overtime, you said.
That
Council
is
President,
overtime
please make
for
sure you're
emphasis.
recognized.
It is but one and the same. It is overtime for police officers to conduct emphasis patrols.
Sorry, 12 point what?
8.
8 million last year, and then it's 10 million this year.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
As part of our analysis of the police department budget, I expect it'll be Greg Doss, who knows SPD's personnel numbers better than most people in the city. I think we'll bring back some analysis about how that sort of fits together, whether the implications that they're going to have enough new officers to cover some of that. And I think another point, and I don't absolutely know this for certain, but I have pretty high confidence in it, that these allocations aren't the only source of funding for emphasis patrols, that they're using the generalized overtime budget as well. So it's more sort of an increment above. But again, I think
It's a fair assessment.
yeah, Greg Doss will come back and be able to sort of lay that all out. And the police chief will be here to do presentation, I forget which day, I think early next week as well. So you can add some additional inquiry there.
All as part of that, or now if you have the answer, I would be curious to better understand if there was any unspent money from 24 on that 12.8 million figure.
I apologize, I did not hear the
No
question.
worries. Thank you. I guess add it to the list.
No, he didn't hear
So with respect to the $12.8 million in the 24 budget, was there any unspent?
Well, we don't know because the year is still unfolding. Our expectation is that there won't be any that is unspent, but it's not impossible.
Thank you.
And I'm going to just check. Councilmember Rivera and Council President, these are new hands? Okay.
It was a follow-up, and I'm asking to be recognized on something that he just said.
I'm going to go back to Councilmember Rivera and then back to you. I'm going to flag colleagues this level of in-depth conversation by just a few people is okay today because we only have Director Eater to present today, much like it was okay that we changed our lunch break. When we move into the department presentations and the central staff presentations, if there's this amount of needing to have a conversation, I will ask that you pose your questions on the record so that staff can follow up with you and to have a side briefing. We do have the time today. We won't have the time in future briefings. Councilmember Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Dan, and thank you, Councilmember Saka, for bringing up Alki, because we're having similar issues in Magnuson Park. But to the point of emphasis patrols, and I have to say North Precinct's been a great partner, and they've put some emphasis there as well. It's not taking care of the concerns. And so my question, and you don't have to answer it now, I'll pose the question and get follow-up later, but I'd love to know where else in the budget we have some funding to manage for the crime and public safety situations that are happening in these various neighborhoods in the city and areas of the city. Particularly parks have been of particular concern this year in general, including Alki Beach. I'll call that a park. Are there other places in the budget where you're including funding to do something other than emphasis patrol, since that in and of itself isn't taking care of the situation, because I understand we don't have enough police officers. You'd have to have them there consistently, probably, in order to really make a difference. So would love to hear if there are other areas that are going to address this.
Yeah, I'd be happy to just give the beginning of an answer. Of course, we can provide more detail, but the Parks Department certainly has a number of investments and FTEs who are devoted to providing public safety and enlivenment of the park. They're two sides of the same coin. So park rangers are deployed throughout in parks throughout the city. There are also park ambassadors whose jobs are to engage and provide programming that brings people into the parks, and eyes and people being around helps with public safety as well.
I appreciate that. The park rangers don't have the same level of authority as police officers, and it's proven. It's been difficult between the lack of police officers and the park rangers not having that level of authority. It's not working, quite frankly. And so what else is within this budget that the mayor's proposing that might have an impact to absorb what we can't do, SPD can't do because of low staffing? So
And I believe you were expecting to have presentations both by the police department and by the Parks Department. They will, I'll be here at the table, but they will be able to dive into much more fine level of information than I'm able to do at this table.
Thank you, Dan. It's my hope you'll share the questions so they're prepared.
100%.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Nelson.
Yeah, because it takes so long for new applicants to eventually perhaps maybe get hired, there is going to be a lag in a long term, at least a year of deficit in officers just from that pool that's applying right now. Here's my thing. Maybe you could ask the public safety presenters, and also hopefully maybe Greg Doss is listening. Emphasis patrols are great. We heard about the DAT yesterday, the Downtown Activation Team, fully support that. But last week, I believe Councilmember Rivera noted that the North Precinct has about 20 officers on patrol at any time. And so emphasis patrols is one need of overtime. However, there's just ongoing need to call in officers to cover deficits in the daily, lineup of patrol. So would like to understand better what the executive's thinking is about making sure that we don't get to a point in 2025 at some point during the year where we're again having the conversation about lack of money for overtime.
Yeah, and I think that some of the overtime certainly is for patrol augmentation in addition to the emphasis patrols that I've been describing.
Okay.
For sure.
Thank you. That helps me understand your previous answer better. Thanks.
Director Eater, I believe we're on bullet point number 2. Good segue here. I'll pass
Okay.
it back to you.
So this is a category of investments. There are 3 that I want to cover briefly. It's support for sworn officers that are provided with new civilian staff. There are 2 newly funded PEO positions who will have expanded duties beyond what PEOs have historically done. These 2 PEOs will review automated cameras and issue citations as allowed by recent changes in the state law and as negotiated with the Seattle Police Officers Guild. That will allow us to move forward with plans to install school zone speed cameras at 18 new locations, or 18 new schools. The second of the 3 categories I mentioned are investigators, civilians who will support the work of sworn detectives and officers to complete investigations. There's about $1 million, and that will fund 7 new FTEs in 2025 and 2026. Those are ongoing positions. And then the third and last in this category are real-time crime center positions. These are management systems analysts. There'll be 12 new FTEs in 2025 and an additional 9 FTEs in 2026. In 2025, the cost is about $2 million. They'll be integrated with a CCTV pilot to coordinate patrol and emergency responses to crime events. All 3 of these categories of civilian support for sworn officers, the intent there is to make more efficient and effective use of the sworn officers who we have on staff. Shall I move on to the third category?
Yes, please.
Third bullet.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
can you just?
Councilmember Morales.
I just want to make sure I'm counting right. That's 30 new positions for that bullet point.
There are, in 2025, there are 1921 positions, and then there are additional 9 positions that come on board in 26. So by the end of the biennium, yes, I get to the same math, 30 positions.
Thank you.
Colleagues, any other questions on this bullet point? Seeing none, back to you, Director Eater.
Okay. This last category is services to support survivors. The mayor is pleased to partner with Councilmember Moore to provide funding that supports survivors of commercial sexual exploitation with advocate staff and community-based support resources. There's $2 million for this purpose each year in the biennium and ongoing within HSD. And that funding will provide support such as appropriate community-based support resources and 5 new city staff who will be advocates to help with find services for the people who need those services, the victims of human trafficking and sexual exploitation.
Thank you. Councilmember Kettle, I saw your hand first, but I'm going to pass it to Councilmember Moore first, if that's all right. No, go ahead. All right, go ahead. Councilmember Kettle.
Thank you, Chair. And there's a reason why I hesitated there. I just wanted to note for this whole slide, basically, that obviously my team, myself, has been working very close with Mr. Doss, Ms. Gorman, Mr. Johnson, and we will continue to do so, to working through this portfolio, the public safety portfolio, to ensure that we're set. And I'm very thankful and I believe in the investments that are shown. I will say, like in terms of bullet number 1, and I've said this before, definitely support care expansion, and then the with fire, SFD as well, which also shows up in a couple of slides later with Health 99. We got Health 1 probably located in this one. That not so much in this biennium, but the next biennium, I believe that we're, in terms of alternative response, we will have some type of adjustment, and it's going to show up in the budget process, not in this set, the 25-26, but no doubt in 27-28. And I think that's something that we should be looking forward to, in the sense of understanding what's happening now with these new programs and these changes, such that when we get to that next set, that we can make smart decisions. And having that mindset that we're going to make changes now, I think is helpful, instead of trying to force it later on. So I just wanted to make that point. Definitely support the civilization aspects where appropriate. And then the last part, number 3, and this is the reason why I asked to go first, is that because of the work that Council's done, the Public Safety Committee's done, and I'm sure Councilmember Moore would not say this about herself, but number 3 is driven in large part, and I've been saying this in committee and outside of committee, by Councilmember Moore. The work that we've done as a committee and what Councilmember Moore did with SOAP, really made the difference. And in terms of on the services, the human services side, to match that. And I just wanted to thank her for her work in this area, because I do believe bullet number 3 really comes out of the efforts that she did in community, working up on Aurora, up in the District 5, in terms of what is a very troubling and difficult situation. So I just wanted to thank her for that, because I see her as the genesis of bullet number 3. And I really appreciate the executive, the mayor, and team to recognize that and, and then adjust as seen in this bullet. So thank you, Director Eder and the mayor and all those working this issue as well. So thank you, Councilmember Moore.
Well said, Councilmember Moore.
Oh, thank you very much for those kind remarks. This was very, very much a team effort. So many people came to the table on this, and clearly the mayor's office heard what was being said, heard from the survivors and the direct service providers at the table, and I am so incredibly grateful for him listening to that and taking those comments and those pleas for help seriously. And so I just wanted to say thank you so much to the mayor's office for being willing to go forward and put this money out there. It is going to make a profound difference in the lives of those individuals. Thank you.
Councilmember Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, because I realize a lot of people watch these meetings, for the record, that I very much support the park rangers. They do an excellent job. SPR is doing everything they can. So didn't want to leave that on the table just the way I said it prior. I just know that there's some activities that they're not able to address that need more, that really, we obviously, there's some level of crime that they're not able to provide, but they do a lot. And I will continue to support the park rangers and those efforts. So thank you, Chair.
Colleagues, anything else on this slide? Before moving on, I will just say thank you to your team and the mayor for expanding our automated camera enforcement and the civilianization of that program. It is a good thing. It's something that I expected Seattleites to be resistant to. And I've heard many requests for speed cameras outside of school zones in my district. Although I did do a walking tour with a couple residents, and the group was split evenly on who wanted and who did not want speed cameras. And really what it comes down to is when we're trying to achieve our Vision Zero goals, by just reducing speeds changes the likelihood of somebody surviving or dying, being hit by a car or having a near miss. And so I think it's good. And before we move on, Councilmember Morales, and then Councilmember Saka.
I did have one question. If you could just maybe high level, what are the services for support survivors, or what is intended there?
I will come back to that question. I do have some
Okay.
some additional information, but
Okay.
it'll take me just a second to pull it up.
Director Eder, would you like a moment, or should I move on to Councilmember Saka at this time?
Let's move on to Councilmember Saka, but I'll get back.
And we'll make sure to get your
thank
question
you.
answered.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I try to bite my tongue. I wasn't going to ask this question, but you opened the gate. You opened the gate, Mr. Chair, on your appropriate color commentary on enforcement cameras, and which leads me to my question. So these 18 positions that are going to be funded as part of the civilianization efforts for automated enforcement technologies, those solely relate to school zone cameras. Is that correct? Because there is speed enforcement cameras, there's block the box enforcement cameras, there's school cameras, there's any number of automated enforcement camera technology. We need speed cameras in Elki and Harbor Avenue yesterday, by the way. But is that correct, that these positions for automated enforcement are proposed to cover school zones only?
That is correct, Councilmember. It is school zones only. I know that there are other kinds. That's what we have funded in the budget.
Thank you. And I would categorically reject that allocation. We need more, and I'll just make it very crystal clear. We need more, speed enforcement cameras in areas where there's a demonstrated need and supported by strong community demand. There are, I am personally skeptical. You know, I don't want this to turn into a policy discussion of like speed cameras or not, but like there are some important equity considerations and just wide-scale mass deployment across the city of any kind of camera I do not support. But in certain communities where there's a strong community demand and need, ergo, Elki, Harbor Avenue, we definitely need more of those. So in any event, I just highlight that as an opportunity. No further questions or comments on this, Mr. Chair, but you did open the door. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Technically, I was closing the door, but Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. Well, you're looking for that. My perspective on the money and the resources would be first to look at an emergency receiving center, and that's what I would be pursuing in discussions with the mayor's office, and certainly supplemental services to that, working with Aurora Commons and REST and OPS and some of those groups that are already More We Love, who are providing additional services, but there is clearly a need for an emergency receiving center. So, thank you.
Thank you. And with that, do you have an answer, or should we come back to your?
No, I do.
Great.
I have some additional information. I'll just read you what I have, and we can all collectively have more discussion when HSD comes to discuss their proposed budget. What I have at this point is the $2 million within HSD will provide support for survivors of commercial sexual exploitation and sex worker interventions, including providing appropriate community-based support resources and 5 new victim advocates staff for real-time and upstream response and care systems navigation. HSD will engage with existing and other referred partners in community engagement opportunities and conduct a literature review which will inform our investment strategy. We will work through options for an expedited funding process.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Councilmember Rivera, is that a new hand?
A new hand.
Okay, I'm gonna allow. I am allowing this today, but we've gone a couple rounds and around on this slide.
Can I invoke vice chair privilege?
I have offered you privileges as the vice chair, and you flatly
you.
rejected them. So
Well,
I will provide you this opportunity today, but I will be more disciplined in the future meetings.
All right. Well, that was a joke, and I don't know what that meant, but you and I can have a conversation offline. Just before we leave the public safety conversation, I did want to acknowledge that the mayor and thank the mayor for efforts made to public safety at schools. It is a conversation we're engaged in with Seattle Public Schools, an important one, and so I didn't want to leave this public safety conversation without acknowledging that. Thank you.
Anything further?
Nope.
Director Eater, we'll move on to the next slide.
Okay. We covered the first of 4 categories. This is the second, investments in housing and homelessness. I covered some of the bullets on this slide, so I will just skip quickly through them. The proposed budget, as I described earlier in a multicolored slide, increases overall funding for affordable housing to historic highs. That's looking at beyond PET only, at the full amount of dollars that are invested in affordable housing. I also mentioned that we were able to avoid all of the pending closures of shelter beds that had been anticipated, about 300 shelter beds that were funded with one-time resources, principally with one-time federal grants that are expiring or have been fully spent. Will be moving forward, will be funded with general fund dollars in the mayor's proposed budget. And then expanding before I move off of that one, I wanted to highlight, this is where I will address a question from Councilmember Wu from earlier today. There's also, in addition to the 2 categories of shelters that I discussed, or maybe I haven't discussed the details of, but amount to 300 total beds. There's also enhanced shelter expansion. And here we are fulfilling the commitment to close the Navigation Center on 12th Avenue in the CID and provide a replacement enhanced shelter elsewhere. Enhanced shelter means some combination of 24/7 access, wraparound services, counseling and supports, and the ability to bring partners and pets into the shelter facility. The location of the replacement facility has not yet been determined. In 2025 proposed budget, the ongoing amount for the replacement is $4 million. That's $1.8 million in a base budget that is ongoing, plus a $2.2 million additional funding, all of which is ongoing. In 2026, that amount is expanded. That's it on closure of shelter beds. The last category that I wanted to talk about on this slide is expanding UCT. The Unified Care Team, as we refer to as UCT, currently operates 5 days a week, citywide. It will be expanded on Saturdays and Sundays with the addition of $3.2 million of ongoing general fund in the proposed 2025 budget. The expansion on Saturdays and Sundays cannot be citywide like Monday through Friday. And that is because of a couple of factors. One is it would cost more than the amount of money that we were able to dedicate to this purpose. And the second factor is that the Unified Care Team relies on the active participation and staffing by police officers. And on Saturdays and Sundays, sworn officers are at their most constrained, and we were not able to expand the UCT with police participation citywide, even if we had more money, because we don't have more officers.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions on this slide? I'll just say that I know even with select areas at the Unified Care Team and having those places where people gather on the weekends are oftentimes the places that need the attention. And so it is not, like you said, even though we don't have the ability, it's also maybe not even necessary to have that expansive, like we do Monday through Friday, and at the same time, those places where people who are working Monday through Friday gather on Saturday and Sunday, having that additional service is helpful. Still seeing no other questions, we'll move on to the next slide.
Okay, slide 33 is the third category of priority ads. This is investments in a healthy Seattle. I wanted to highlight for you that the mayor's proposed budget would expand the Health 99 service that currently provides post-overdose responses and follow-up with people who have experienced particularly opioid overdoses. It would add one new team. I believe there are 3 teams currently, so this would be a 4th team. And it's a combination of a combined effort from the fire department and HSD. HSD provides counselors. The second category that I wanted to bring to your attention, we've talked about in depth in a separate slide. That's the investments in youth wellness that total approaching $32 million in the proposed budget. And the third category is a public health strategy to address the opioid crisis. And the proposed budget includes about $14 million. There's $5 million in particular that I want to call your attention to for addressing substance use disorders. This is funded with $1.9 million in opioid settlement funds and $3 million of general fund for drug treatment services. Unless there are questions, I will press on.
Just from the revenue source of that opioid settlement fund, was that accomplished by Attorney General Ferguson or City Attorney Davison?
I believe that is the city's share of the state settlement. That's my understanding.
And so this was the settlement that cities from across the state had to sign off on, and the work was done by Attorney General Bob Ferguson to accomplish this settlement. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. If my understanding is incorrect, I will follow up with you after this meeting.
Thank you. Still seeing no questions?
Okay, the last slide is the fourth of the four categories. It is investments in a thriving Seattle. The first item on the slide that I want to talk to you about is investments in arts and culture. The mayor's proposed budget would maintain all of the grant funding that has been established in this year's budget for next year. So there's no decrease in grants that the Office of Arts and Culture will provide to arts institutions. In fact, there is a $2 million increase for particularly challenged arts institutions. This is a new program that is funded in the proposed budget that wasn't in the base budget. There is also a proposal to broaden the use of the admissions tax, which is one of the main funding sources for the Office of Arts and Culture. The proposal would allow for the admissions tax to be spent still only on arts and culture. That's the same as it is today. The change is that more departments would be allowed to spend the money for those same purposes. And in particular, in addition to fully funding the ongoing grants and other programs in the Office of Arts and Culture, there would be some money spent, about $1 million for parks and another $1 million for Seattle Center. Those programs in the other departments are not new grant programs. They are effectively relieving the general fund, where the general fund used to pick up arts and culture investments that could have been funded at the Office of Arts and Culture had that been the home. But they are in Seattle Center because they're about events that happen at the Seattle Center, and at the Parks Department because they are programs that happen in parks. So we are effectively relieving the general fund of an obligation to pay for some of those programs by allowing for a shift of those programs onto the ad tax without making any changes to the grants that go to arts institutions through the Office of Arts and Culture. I bet there are going to be questions about that one because I don't think I was crystal clear, but I'll do my best.
Do you want to?
I can continue through the rest of the slide and we can come back.
I do have Councilmember Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Dan, do you know, so does this change the Office of Arts and Culture's base budget, or is this the overage? I mean, the ad tax comes in over what we expect from the year before. So is this the overage, or is this the baseline? Do you know? And if not, you can get back to me. That's okay.
If I can't find the information immediately,
That's
I
okay.
will get back to you.
And then I know that there's the Municipal Art Fund, and I thought Parks contributed to that. Ben, you may remember, but I'm not sure. The capital departments contribute to the Municipal Art Fund, and I thought Parks had but maybe they don't.
So the 1% for art programs, so
Yeah.
1% of the capital projects that are built in the city are dedicated to arts, and sometimes that art is incorporated into the project, and sometimes it is used to fund public art more generally. So so Parks as a capital department, SDOT as a capital department, they all contribute. The utilities, who are intensely capital departments,
Yes.
tend to be the largest contributors on that front. But
I thought Parks did too, and so I wonder if this is then over that amount. And then Seattle Center, via the contract with the climate pledge. So Dan, I guess I'm just saying I'd love to see some kind of chart that has the various fund sources and what impact this has for the office, and then versus monies that are coming in from
Yeah.
those other efforts.
Okay, be happy to follow up with that.
Thank you,
with
Dan.
on that. I'll give you the high level, which is that the Office of Arts and Culture budget increases from 24 to 25. But to be fair, the costs for doing business, all the administrative costs went up because we were paying people an increased wage in 25 compared to 26. So you'd expect them to go up. That doesn't mean that there weren't other changes in the Office of Arts and Culture. The budget book has a series of those changes. They are all, under $500,000 or thereabouts. So I don't think it probably makes sense to dive into that level of detail here, but we can follow up and give you a sense of what's happening in the Office of Arts and Culture and how they're funded.
Thank you, Dan.
And if I recall, they're one of the first two departments presenting this week, actually. So you'll have an opportunity to speak to the director directly.
Thank you.
On to item 2.
Thank you. So item 2, I also mentioned this is the Equitable Development Initiative, EDI. The program serves to fight displacement. That was one of the colored graphs that I showed you in the context of the payroll expense tax and other funds. Those monies are all increasing in the biennium to historic levels. The downtown activation plan investments. The 2024 budget had a number of one-time investments that are expected that were otherwise going to end, and we think that the downtown activation plan has been successful and influential enough that we are proposing to continue them. And in particular, there is funding for some form of revitalization at Westlake Park, which may take the form of some partnership with and be timed to support the World Cup event in 2026. There are public space and arts activations. There are at the Office of Arts and Culture and elsewhere. There are enhanced cleaning expected downtown, continuing the surge that happened recently. Coordination on South Downtown projects and development. The last item on this slide is a new tree nursery that would be started with funding in the mayor's proposed budget that adds about $700,000. It also adds one new FTE. Both of those would be in the Seattle Public Utilities in 2025. It would establish a city-owned tree nursery. And currently, the city gives away hundreds of trees for street trees. Those trees, for a variety of reasons, don't have a 100% survival rate, in part because sometimes they don't get watered as much as they need to, but in part because they aren't perfectly suited to our climate. We buy those trees, small saplings that get planted and eventually become full-grown street trees. We buy those from other states, private nurseries in other states, and they don't have the same range of compatibility with with Seattle and Washington State's climate. So we think this is a win-win. It can save money and also have trees that are better suited to our climate and better survival rates.
Well said. Councilmember Moore?
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. I had a question, because I think I heard you say a while back that the budget for childcare was being cut. Is that childcare services? And it just seems to me that that is very much an investment in a thriving city, and it's very much an equity issue. So could you just expand on that a little bit?
I mentioned that in the context of some programs that have some services for parents. I don't know if child care is one of them, but this is in the sweetened beverage tax family of investments. There are no changes that happen in 2025. To the extent that there are any changes, they would be in 2026. And we are going to have to reevaluate that situation in the fall of 2025 when I am back again defending a new proposed budget for 26.
So there are no changes to the child care subsidies? That's
If the ones that happen through the levy that in deal, no, those are separately funded altogether.
okay. That's a separate fund.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
That concludes the prepared slides and remarks. I've enjoyed engaging and have answered some but not all of your questions. I will follow up to get you other information.
I know that this last slide says questions, and I'm glad that we didn't wait here until we have questions. I'm just going to, this is a good day one. The level of engagement, Councilmember Rivera, Saka, and Nelson, that you are having is good and healthy. It is literally our job to do. And there will be at times when we come in the future with other people presenting that we will have those time constraints. This is something that has happened many times over the course of the past. And when we find ourselves in these time constraints, I'll just ask that we give everyone the opportunity to put their questions on the record, even if there's not going to be an answer in real time, so that everyone gets their questions or their statements on the record, but we're also able to move through, because the level of the number of presentations and other people's time is considerable as we come closer. I'll save just a couple. I have 3 last thoughts that I will share at the very end, and I see Councilmember Saka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for you entertaining my pesky questions to help us better understand. I'm doing my due diligence, and so these questions are really important to help us as elected council members and the public understand what's going on and the situation at hand and exactly what the scope of the challenges and opportunities we're confronted with. So defer to you and your wise judgment, Mr. Chair, on how you want to handle all the questions. One strategy I suspect, and I'll recommend that we consider employing on a going forward basis, or we are actually under the tighter constraints, is like having our colleagues, myself included, saving all of our questions until the very end of a presentation. And I actually did that towards the last couple slides. So I have one question that would like to better understand on slide 31, that third bullet, expanding UCT services in select areas. Where are these select areas exactly? And how are those determinations made? That's my first question. And I'm more be interested in both here or offline. Like getting clarity around both questions here or offline. Certainly, how the determinations were made.
I have no answers for you about exactly where the UCT will be expanded. I am assured from the folks in the mayor's office that they will be evaluating real-time data and making decisions based on the highest need in areas that have presented through data evaluation that they are most in need of UCT deployment. We will certainly stay in the loop with you and show you both the data and our decisions as they're made.
Thank you. Yes, would love more clarity on that, as I mentioned. Appreciate it. And then just a hanging question I had related to, so as I understand it, there is, as part of the potentially 40 plus pieces of related legislation made, proposed pursuant to this broader budget for next year. One of those items is a proposal to raise rates on parking enforcement from, I think, the Seattle Municipal Court. They commissioned a study and really looked into this, which I appreciate, because also, as I understand, parking enforcement rates haven't been raised in Seattle in about 15 years or so, and we do not at all match or are in line with what other neighboring jurisdictions do, although that's one and only factor. We also need to consider equity and, a number of factors. But my point is, there is a proposal to raise rates, as I understand it, on parking enforcement. And presumably, if we pass that, that would be effective and can start collecting revenue beginning next year. But that would really only impact, would that impact the 2025 budget? Or would that more impact the proposed 26 budget that we're being asked to endorse at this early stage, or both? Help me better understand the kind of offsetting impact of some of these increased fees that we can potentially expect.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Just want to make sure the listening public is clear. There is not a proposal to change the on-street parking rates, the meter rates.
Fines.
It's the fines,
Fines.
if
Yes,
you are
thank you.
caught
Fines.
not having paid those.
Precision matters. Thank you. Fines.
Well,
You're right.
I knew exactly what
Yep,
you meant. I
yep,
just wanted
yep.
to make sure we were all on the same page. My understanding is that I don't know exactly what the timing is for when the new fines schedule would go into effect, but it definitely has implications for the 2025 budget. It adds millions of dollars of citation revenue. I don't remember the exact figure, but in 25, there are added revenues that continue into 26 as well.
And just to emphasize that point, and that'll be consistent with other proposed fee increases as well as the fines, that the revenue forecast that underlies the proposed budget has assumed that you will adopt those fee or fine increases, and obviously that is your choice. If ultimately you do not, that will put us out of balance potentially by the increment of revenues that would have been generated, and that becomes part of an effort to balance overall. So just so you understand that dynamic, not suggesting you approve or not approve any of them, but that's just the underlying reality.
Thank you. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Wonderful. Any last comments, questions, colleagues? Otherwise, I'm going to wrap us up, which is thank you, Director Eater. Thank you, Director Noble, for your presentation today. This year, we will need to make large changes towards budget sustainability and stability. We will be using one-time funds to patch gaps, as demonstrated by Director Eater, while we continue to review, examine, and investigate more ways to correct our budget trends. Thank you, Councilmember Morales, for setting us up with some of the budget reform on internal services. So that we are able to deliver our level best services and stretch and use every dollar, every tax dollar that is paid to our city to its fullest ability. So this is concluding day one. I look forward to day two this coming Friday. We will have public comment at the beginning and then move right on into our department presentations. We have reached the end of today's committee. The next Select Budget Committee is Friday, September 27th at 9:30 a.m. Is there any further business to come before the committee? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.